Hey guys, this is a market update. We're going to look at Bitcoin and also the state of a bunch of entities that have had to sell out of their Bitcoin because of what's gone on in the crypto market over the last few weeks. Some of these crazy institutions that have been lending over and over again and have basically just been carried out. FTX have come to the rescue here, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Without them rescuing some of these firms, I think Bitcoin would be way lower than it is now. So we may have seen a local bottom, at least for the trading range, but I think there's still a lot to come out in terms of, you know, who had exposure essentially to 3AC. 3AC is the hedge fund that has gone completely belly up, and a lot of people have exposure to this. And so we're seeing some of the ramifications of that right now. So let's go over the Bitcoin price for now. As you can see, we met support at around 20,000, and I think this may turn out to be quite a strong local support area. If you look at the chart going back to 2020, the last time that we actually were around here, the price also chopped and traded around this level. And you can see it was actually resistance around here for quite a period of time. Now, moving forward, obviously, we've had all this time, all of this monetary stimulus, and then the unraveling of this. We're also meeting support right here. I believe that the price would be way lower if FTX and Alameda hadn't have stepped in and basically bailed out some of these funds, but there could be way more coming as well. So definitely something to watch out for. Going to have a look at the miners as well, who will keep a lid on the price. For a local support though, 20,000, I would like to see us potentially test this again and then bounce off of this again. If we test this a couple of times and maybe come a bit higher, that's a good sign that 20,000 is, you know, quite a solid support there. So I'm looking for 20,000 as a support level. I'm not bullish on the price of Bitcoin, at least for the next, you know, few months. A lot depends on the macro, which I'll get onto later on in this video as well. But for now, this is a bear market, both in the macro, which is, you know, the worst it's been in years and years, and with the deleveraging of crypto specifically as well. But we could, you know, start to see potentially some sort of bottom forming, but I believe that's going to rely more on the macro as well. So let's get on to that. This is Bitfarms, who have actually sold 3,000 Bitcoin. Now, we'll go through this because this is quite hilarious. So they sold 3,000 Bitcoin recently, which is obviously a big chunk of their Bitcoin holdings. And if you hear why they're doing this, in the previous video I said during a bear market, miners find it very difficult to run their business because during a bull market, equity is valued very highly, and these big miners, they have access to the equity markets and public markets, and so they sell their equity at very lofty prices. Interest rates are usually lower in bull markets as well, and so you can borrow money quite cheaply. That is not the case right now, and so you have these miners who are having no other option other than to sell their Bitcoin in the market to fund their own operations, to fund their energy costs, and to fund investment in new miners. So we are selling a portion of our BTC holdings and daily production. So this is really important, right? They are continuing to sell, and they're selling their daily production of Bitcoin right now. So please consider this. This is Bitfarms. This is one of the bigger miners. There are going to be a ton of smaller miners, private entities, you know, small guys who absolutely have no access to capital whatsoever, and they will just be selling their Bitcoin right now. You know, if they're in the same sort of situation, they say that this is the best way, that the best and least expensive method. Read into that. They can't sell equity now, and borrowing rates have gone through the roof because you can't borrow money now as a Bitcoin miner. The Bitcoin price is so low, no one's going to lend you money because it's almost unprofitable as well in terms of how much it costs to mine Bitcoin versus the current price as well. So a really complex situation, but it boils down to miners will be selling for the foreseeable future, and so they will keep a lid on the price. What's kind of funny about this though is that they are just selling 3,000 Bitcoin. Now, if you look back towards the start of this year in January, they actually bought 1,000 Bitcoin. This is embarrassing for them, obviously, because if we look at the price in January, we're around 46,000. So they bought 1,000 Bitcoin at 46,000 near highs, and then they've had to sell 3,000 at around 20. So an absolute shambles of what's going on with them, essentially mismanaging their business. they took out, if you actually look down here, they took out a loan with Galaxy Digital. Now, Galaxy Digital, I believe, have exposure to 3AC as well, and this whole lending debacle. So what you can see is a lot of the liquidity coming out of this market, and that sends shockwaves everywhere, including to Bitcoin miners who now have no choice other than to sell their Bitcoin. So when we're looking at the price, I'm bullish on Bitcoin for the long term, but the short term, there's nothing telling me that the price is going to start making higher highs and maybe testing this resistance at 25. You know, the macro's bad, and look, these Bitcoin miners have to be selling their Bitcoin. So that is what I'm looking at. This is just embarrassing, buying Bitcoin at 46 and selling it at 20. We can also see here, for the last year, you can see this big inflow. This is miner inflow into exchanges. Now, why would a miner send Bitcoin into an exchange? The only reason is to sell it, or potentially covering debts that they've had with, other, participants. So whenever you see these big spikes, you potentially are seeing some selling. Now you can see big spikes here during the bull market. That's, clever miners selling out during good times. But if we're seeing any more of these high spikes in a bear market, it's obviously selling coming in and potentially forced selling. So definitely something to keep an eye on. If you do trade Bitcoin, I'll leave the link to Bybit in the description. You can go long and short in the futures markets there. Don't trade futures if you're a beginner, but if you do trade futures, they'll give you a deposit bonus up to $4,000. So if you have crypto on other platforms, they'll give you a deposit bonus up to $4,000. I'll leave that link in the description. Now to get onto FTX Alameda and how they've essentially potentially saved the market here. I think the market would be 50% lower if they hadn't have stepped in and essentially lent money to a lot of struggling firms. So I'll show you this right now. This has actually come out today. Now, Voyager is one of the lending apps, and these lending apps use some institutional entities like Galaxy Digital and some other lending and borrowing desks. And they obviously have lent money to 3AC as well. Why would they do this? Well, obviously, Voyager is in the middle, right? And it's not just Voyager. There's lots of other lending apps as well. There's one in Hong Kong, I think, that's really exposed to this. Yeah, essentially, everyone gives them their crypto, and then they take the value of that and, loan it out to people that need money. Now, that's obviously going to earn them a yield, and that's how they pay their yield, when you invest in these apps. There's nothing wrong with that. This is what banks do all day long. The problem has been just the unregulated nature and, just crazy decisions to lend money to institutions that I don't know what the terms of the agreement were. It was obviously uncollateralized. They didn't have collateral on account. So this was essentially an uncollateralized loan. Otherwise, they would have the Bitcoin and crypto here to actually sell on account, but they don't. So you can see here, Voyager issued a notice of default to 3AC for failure to repay its loan. So 3AC has borrowed, as you can see here, 15,250 Bitcoin and $350 million. That was USDC. So essentially, Voyager now is on the hook for 15,000 Bitcoin and $350 million that they potentially would have to completely write off. 3AC is completely bankrupt. You don't know what they've lost because they were borrowing and then putting in other protocols. And obviously things have come down 60, 70, 80% on whatever they were invested in. So they can't pay. So this is obviously bad news for Voyager. Now, this is also bad news for them. As you can see here, this is Dirty Bubble, who has essentially shown us how much Voyager owe to their clients. So this is what their clients have put on their account with Voyager, which is 25,000 Bitcoin and $384 million. They lost, so that's what they owe to their clients. That's what their clients have put on Voyager and expect back. As you can see, they've lost essentially all of the dollars and 70%, 75% of the Bitcoin, 15 out of 25,000. So that's not there. So you think, well, are Voyager going to go bust? Well, what happened was basically Sam Bankman-Fried and Alameda have lent Voyager $500 million to essentially stop them going under and going bankrupt because of 3AC themselves, going under as well. So what you can see here is that the credit line that SBF gave them is $200 million and 15,000 Bitcoins. And that links up with the fact that they owe 15,000 Bitcoin and 350 million to that 3AC thing. So that is just a clear bailout from SBF and Alameda. That is why I believe that if they hadn't have stepped in and lent money to Voyager and some others that we could potentially be way lower. But for right now, potentially these firms have found a footing. But I think there's probably more to come out here, and there is probably some more unwinding that's going to happen over time. So again, just kind of another bearish weight on the price. Some potential good news though is it seems like a lot of the worst of that selling is now over or coming towards an end. There probably are, extra miners that need to sell. There probably are some firms that need to rearrange their risk profiles and everything like that. But we would hope that the absolute worst of that real dump and selling is over, and there may be some shockwaves, but at least we can move forward from that and potentially find a bottom here for the price. Something else I want to look at is oil, which I think is really important at the moment. In the last video, I said that oil was looking to fall away a little bit. During that video, the price had just come down to this level around 116, and it's now absolutely cratered again down to about 108, down about 5% I think today. This is really important because if oil keeps coming down, well, there's two things here. The first one is if oil starts to crater and really fall off, that is obviously telling us that the market expects quite a large recession coming this year over the next 6 months. Now, that's potentially fairly bad short term because corporate earnings are going to come down if there is a recession. And so earnings forecasts are all going to come down. That's going to weigh on the stock market, which is going to weigh on Bitcoin and crypto. However, in a general sense, oil coming down is good for inflation generally. And so if this comes down and starts to consolidate around at the 100 level or even below, that's going to be long-term good for inflation, which means that monetary policy can ease off a little bit, and that's going to ease everything, including the price of Bitcoin and crypto. Now, oil, for me, is still really just trending here, and so we don't know whether this is just going to kind of come and actually hit this support line and maybe bounce off a little bit. Seems unlikely. The probability is that it continues lower or consolidates. There's a ton of support here as well. So if you see around this price, I think it's around 100, 105. So that would be obviously a support level down here around $100. But anything around $100 definitely eases inflation a lot. So if this keeps coming down, it's kind of short term not great for the economy because it means that a recession's definitely here. And so that's going to be short term bad. But this coming off is long term better for markets and crypto in general. So keep an eye on oil because it will front run a lot of the economic activity that will come out later during results and earnings later on down in the year. There's an update coming to my crypto investor course as well this month. I'm adding futures and options trading tutorials, guides, about 50 plus videos on derivatives, futures, options, and trading. If you're interested in that or all of the other videos, there's going to be over 250 videos now. Gets updated for free for existing users, but the price does go up over time as I add in those extras and update the course. But if you want to check out the crypto investor course, I'll leave that link in the description. I'm James with MoneyCG. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.